What if the people meant to save the world weren't heroes at all? What if they were just broken? If you had walked into the nestled Nook Inn on that fateful morning in Trostenwald, you wouldn't have seen legends. You would have seen a group of dirty, suspicious, and deeply traumatized outcasts who wanted nothing more than to stay hidden. They were fugitives. They were liars. They were ghosts of their former selves, running from pasts so dark they didn't think they deserved a future. We often talk about their epic battles and god-tier magic, but to truly understand this team, we have to look at the cracks in their foundation. This is a story about the baggage they carried before they ever picked up a blade. In this first part of our Fugitives to Heroes series, we are unmasking the 4 members who were most defined by their secrets: Caleb, Nott, Fjord, and Beau. This is the fractured past. Caleb Widogast, the architect of his own purgatory. Caleb Widogast is perhaps one of the most tragic figures in D&D history. When Campaign 2 began, viewers saw a scruffy, paranoid wizard who obsessed over every copper piece and avoided baths as if they were a death sentence. But this wasn't a quirk. Caleb's filth was a deliberate penance. He felt that a man who had done what he had done didn't deserve the comfort of being clean. He didn't deserve to feel human. The golden boy of Rexcentrum, long before he was Caleb, he was Bren Aldrich Ermendrud. He was a bright, hopeful boy from the Offenden Pass, chosen for his genius to attend the Sultries Academy. He was the pride of his parents, simple people who gave everything so their son could serve the Empire. But Bren fell into the hands of Trent Ikethon, a man who didn't just teach magic, he engineered souls. Trent saw in Bren a perfect instrument of the state. He subjected Bren and his classmates to training that involved embedding residuum crystals into their skin to amplify their power. But the true horror was psychological. The night of the fire, the turning point, the moment Bren Aldrich Ermendrud died, was the night of the fire. Trent Ikethon didn't just want loyalty, he wanted his students to be untethered from everything but the Empire. Through false memories and systematic gaslighting, Bren was convinced his parents were traitors. To prove his devotion, he did the unthinkable. He barricaded the doors of his childhood home and set it ablaze. The screams he heard that night didn't just burn his ears, they scorched his mind. The fugitive in the sanatorium, Caleb didn't immediately become a wanderer. He spent 11 years in the Vergessen sanatorium, a hollow shell of a man, catatonic and broken by the realization of what he'd done once the mental shroud lifted. It was only through a chance encounter with a mysterious woman and his own growing mastery of the very magic that had cursed him that he escaped. The weight of Dunamancy. When we meet him in Trostenwald, Caleb isn't traveling to see the world. He is a fugitive on a desperate quest for Dunamancy, the magic of time and potential. He doesn't want to use magic to rule, he wants to use it to perform a cosmic undo. His entire motivation for the first half of the campaign is the belief that if he can become powerful enough, he can travel back to that night in the Offenden Pass, kill his younger self, and save his parents. He is a man who is literally running toward his own death to fix his past. The relationship with Nott. But even in this darkness, Caleb found a reason to keep moving. He found Nott. Their bond wasn't built on heroism, it was built on a mutual understanding of being monsters. Caleb saw in Nott someone he could protect, perhaps a way to balance the scales of the lives he had taken. Together, they were 2 broken souls hiding in the shadows of the Empire, praying that the past would stay buried in the ash. Nott the Brave, the mother in a monster's skin. If Caleb was a man running from his memories, the small green figure at his side was running from her own reflection. When we first meet Nott the Brave, she is the comic relief, a chaotic, kleptomaniac goblin with an irrational fear of water and a very rational love for high-proof alcohol. But as any fan of the Mighty Nein knows, with Nott, nothing is what it seems. The Curse of the Goblinoid. For the first 50 episodes, Nott is a mystery wrapped in a porcelain mask. She tells everyone she's a goblin who just didn't fit in with her cruel tribe. But the truth is far more tragic. Nott wasn't born a goblin. She was Veth Bernardo, a halfling woman, a wife, and a mother living a quiet, happy life in the town of Felderwin. Her life was shattered when a goblin raid tore her away from her family. In a desperate act of sacrifice to save her husband Yeza and their son Luke, Veth was captured and subjected to a cruel, ritualistic death by a goblin shaman. But death wasn't the end. Through a dark curse, her soul was forcibly shoved into the body of a goblin, the very creature she loathed, the creatures that had destroyed her life. The internal fugitive, Nott, is a fugitive in the most literal sense. She is a prisoner in a body she hates. Every time she looks in a mirror, she sees the face of a monster. This is why she wears the mask. This is why she drinks, to numb the dissonance of being a nurturing mother trapped in a form designed for malice. Her kleptomania wasn't just greed. She was obsessively collecting trinkets and alchemy supplies, hoping to find a way to transmute herself back into Veth. The symbiosis with Caleb, her bond with Caleb, which she calls best friends, is actually a desperate pact of survival. She saw Caleb's potential as a wizard and realized he was her only hope. She protected him, stole for him, and nurtured his power because she believed that one day he would become powerful enough to cast the spell that would set her soul free. When you watch Nott in those early episodes, you aren't just watching a funny goblin, you're watching a mother grieving for a life she thinks is lost forever. Her bravery doesn't come from a lack of fear, it comes from the fact that she has already lost everything, and she will burn the world down before she lets anyone hurt her found family. Fjord, the man of 1,000 masks. Then there is Fjord. If Caleb and Nott were hiding from the world, Fjord was busy inventing a version of himself that the world would respect. Fjord enters the story as a charismatic half-orc with a smooth, confident southern drawl. He's the straight man of the group, the one who tries to keep the chaos in check. But Fjord's entire persona was a beautifully constructed lie. The orphan shame, Fjord grew up as an orphan in Port Damali, a half-orc who felt like he belonged nowhere. He was bullied for his tusks, mocked for his heritage, and spent his life trying to shave off the rough edges of his identity. He hated the monstrous side of himself so much that he literally filed down his tusks to look more human. The confident voice? It was a mimicry of his old mentor, Vandron. Fjord didn't have a voice of his own. He was just a collection of pieces he'd stolen from men he admired. The Pact of the Drowning Man, his status as a fugitive, is more metaphysical. After a mysterious explosion at sea left him drowning and desperate, he was reached by Ukatoa, a Leviathan demigod locked beneath the waves. Fjord traded his freedom for his life. He became a warlock, granted power by a patron who didn't care about his soul, only about being released from its prison. The running man, throughout the first half of the journey, Fjord is constantly looking over his shoulder. He is terrified that if he stops being useful to Ukatoa, he will lose the magic that makes him special. They'll realize he's not the leader they think he is. He isn't just running from a sea monster, he's running from the fear of being ordinary. Beauregard Lionett, the rebellious truth seeker. Finally, we come to Beauregard Beau's Lionett. If the others were running from their pasts, Beau was actively trying to punch hers in the face. Beau is often the hardest member of the Mighty Nine too, like in the beginning. She's abrasive, she's rude, and she has a pathological hatred for anyone who tells her what to do. But when you peel back the layers of her aggression, you find a young woman who is treated as a commodity rather than a daughter. The daughter sold for profit. Beau wasn't born into poverty, she was born into the wealthy Lionett family. But to her father, Thoreau Lionett, Beau was a problem to be solved. She didn't fit the mold of a graceful heiress. She was rebellious, she experimented, and she saw through her father's shallow social climbing. In an act of ultimate betrayal, her father literally paid the Cobalt Soul, an international order of monks and archivists, to take her away. She was kidnapped by her own father's guards and forced into a life of monastic discipline against her will. To Beau, the Cobalt Soul wasn't a calling, it was a prison. The fugitive of the mind, Beau's escape was internal. She spent years inside the archives learning that knowing is half the battle, but she used that knowledge as a weapon. She became a truth seeker because her entire childhood was built on the lies of her father. When we meet her, she is a fugitive from expectation. She wears her surliness like armor, convinced that if she lets anyone get close, they will eventually try to control her or sell her out, just like her family did. She is a woman who would rather hit first and ask questions later because, in her experience, questions only lead to more lies. So, here we are, a mother trapped in a monster's body, drinking to forget her own name. A half-orc playing a part in a play he didn't write, bound to a god of the deep, and a woman whose own father sold her to a monastery to be fixed. On their own, these four were destined for a short life and a tragic end. They were broken pieces of a world that didn't want them. They were fugitives of the Empire, fugitives of their families, and fugitives of their own souls. But a broken mirror can still reflect the light. How did these four lost souls manage to turn toward the sun? How did they stop running and start fighting, not for themselves, but for each other? To understand that, we have to look at the three members who acted as the group's compass: the chaotic joy of Jester Lavore, the silent grace of Yasha Nidoran, and the grounded wisdom of Caduceus Clay. In our next episode, we'll witness the future reclaimed. We'll see how faith, love, and a few dozen blueberry cupcakes turned a band of fugitives into the legendary heroes of the realm. What do you think was the most heartbreaking realization about these four? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in part 2.